Fab. Okay, here we go. So yes, welcome to our Thread 1 Musical Theatre Research Alliance in conversation with Besfort Williams. So exciting. But it's really great to see so many people here. There's a huge number of people and it's lovely to have you all in. Please remember, pop in the chat any questions that you have as we go along. But today we're going to continue to explore our topic that's at the heart of every performer's career, and that is vocal health and sustainability in musical theatre voice. So whether you're a performer, teacher, student, or somebody who likes musical theatre, we know that the voice needs care and the right tools to thrive long term. I'm just going to get you, can you just mute yourselves? Just make sure you're on mute, as I've got a little bit of a lovely tick going on somewhere here. So yeah, just make sure you're all muted. There we go. Thanks, Isabel. That's great. Megan, I'm muting you. There we go. So to help us explore this, we're looking at asking questions from a practitioner point of view. And so today we've got Besfort Williams for a conversation. And Besfort is one of the UK's leading voice pedagogues with particular expertise in singing voice rehabilitation, long-term health of professional performers. So over the past 2 decades, he's worked with singers across the West End, on Broadway, touring productions, and throughout the wider performing arts industry, helping them to develop voices that are not only expressive and versatile, but capable of meeting the demands of a long and sustained career. So alongside his private practice, Besfort is singing voice rehabilitation coach at Guy's and St Thomas's Hospital, where he works as part of a multidisciplinary team and supports performers recovering from vocal injury. And his work bridges performance, education, rehabilitation and voice science, giving him a unique perspective on what it takes to keep a voice healthy under the pressures of professional performance. Now, I know last time we were chatting to Amanda Flynn, who also holds that role, so it's going to be really interesting today to get the UK perspective on what we had as a US perspective of the same role. Besfort's also a passionate educator, and he teaches at leading conservatoires and drama schools and mentors singing teachers and advocates for evidence-informed vocal training. What I really like about your work, Besfort, is that it's not about fixing problems, not only fixing problems, but it's about the sort of prevention of issues in the first place. So I'll be really excited to chat to you about that today. And today we're talking about what vocal health really means, and we're hopefully putting some of those sort of myths to bed and getting an idea of perspectives of practitioners in the field at the moment. So please join me in welcoming Besfort Williams. Yes, the crowd goes wild. Thank
It's an
you.
honour to be here, so thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for that introduction as well.
I know, I can send the rest later on, the other 2 pages. So great, yeah, thank you again for coming in, and it's really kind of you to give up your time for us today. Just as a sort of to give you an overview of what's going to happen with the information that we get in these in conversation with sessions, they're going to be pulled together, and I'm going to be writing a little paper around about what these kind of perspectives were and looking at them within current literature as well. So I'm bringing Besfort's insights, Amanda's insights, and then Tracy Bourne is our final in conversation with, and that's in 2 weeks' time. So look out for that, and then we will be running a bit of a round table around this topic. So anyway, on to the more exciting things. Besfort. So I'm gonna just like bring in this idea of trying to define what it is we're talking about today, and kind of from your point of view. In terms of vocal sustainability in the context of musical theatre performance, how do you define that, or what is it to you when you are working towards it with a performer?
I think being able to sustain an eight or nine show week and manage a life as well. So being able to, I mean, the singing and the performing is the professional and work part of that person's life. But there's so much more to what's going on. So sustainability for me, has to involve whether that person is able to carry on living as a human being and not just kind of be blindsided by their work, I guess.
Yeah, that's completely that almost made me go, what? Because we don't really think about that side of things, and we should, of course, all the time think about that, because we don't exist just to be on stage for everybody. That's not the point, although it could feel like that at some times, I think. But yeah, that's a really, really interesting, because I think my first point is always getting them through the shows and making sure that it's sustained on stage.
Hmm.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. We talked as well, sort of previously, and I was chatting to students as well about what they do in terms of the additional voicing, like the media, like the promotion, like the stage door, like the classes. I
Yeah.
think that's another thing that I kind of was going to ask you about too, is a lot of the West End performers that I work with, they'll be running workshops in the day, or they'll be doing something else to supplement their income.
Completely.
So
Teaching
that's,
teaching
yeah,
exercise classes and teaching
yeah,
children and
yes,
yeah, a
yeah,
lot of West End performers don't have the luxury of just performing in the evenings.
yes.
And some choose to have jobs throughout, so that they might be in a privileged position where they can just rely on their performing work. But
Mhm.
some will choose to still continue to teach throughout the day. I
Mm.
think there are specific roles where actually life has to take a bit of a backseat for certain people, but that's a really individual thing, um, and it's a person by
Yeah,
person and role by role situation.
yeah. Are there any roles that that you think of where people are like, great, love this, can definitely have a lovely time here? I know we could definitely say Fontaine, but we can't really because I know she has a lovely bit of a break. She'll come back
I,
on. Um,
yes, I think again it's tricky because it's tricky to name specific roles because it so depends on the artist that's been
mhm.
hired for that role.
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
depends on the aesthetic of that show in that moment in time. So, I mean, the sound that we expect to hear certain characters making is constantly evolving, constantly changing in some of the shows that have been around for decades.
Mm.
So it's tricky to kind of say that that's the kind of role that you want if you want to keep having a life. Um,
Yes. That's, yeah, and it's hard to just nail into that, isn't it?
yeah,
Actually, I fancy a lovely easy one. Thank you very much.
if
Um,
only, if only.
but it has changed, doesn't it, over the years? I think that was sort of something that I was going to come back onto, which is that the demand, the vocal demand that we see, the vocal styling that we see, and the expectation that we see has changed so much. Like I would say, I mean, I've been teaching for about 28 years or something, and I've see a massive shift from the 90s, kind of that, these approaches. What are your
Absolutely.
thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the trend generally tends to be higher, louder,
Mhm.
and more bombastic, I guess. So what performers? I mean, I remember when I was training that the role of Alphaba was something that, or the sing of Alphaba was something that maybe only a handful of people in our year could make those sounds. And now the expectation is that the majority of singers that are in the industry are able to make sounds that resemble the sounds that you would expect Alphabet, for example, to make. So the
Mm.
landscape has completely changed, um,
Yeah.
and it
And
continues to change.
yeah, I think, and there, that just sort of, it sparked in my brain as well the idea of, if you've got a natural voice which is not actually sitting in that place, and you are working really hard to make sure
Mhm.
that you've got your toppies, and it feels okay in a belt. We're all right. I've got a high belt up there. I can get up there. I'll go for
Yeah.
that. But then the impact on vocal health in those terms, um, what do you see kind of in your role coming in? Do you see people who are not sitting in their natural voice and are pushing themselves out to get these roles to kind of survive? Or, what are you seeing?
It's a really, really, really interesting topic to talk about, actually, because there's a difference between learning how to sing a role and a role fitting the voice that that person has, the tessitura,
Mm.
and where their voice naturally sits. And I think whereas in the classical industry, there's probably a lot more attention paid um, to the material that the singer sings being appropriate for the singer.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think in musical theatre there's not as much in professional musical theatre. There's not really a consideration as to whether the role is suited for that particular performer. That said, um, usually if people have been hired, they've been hired because they can make those sounds. So
You would hope. You
you
would,
would hope,
you
but
would hope. But not always.
not
Yeah, I was going to
always. So
say not always. Yeah.
you do sometimes have performers that have to really bend over backwards to try and make certain
Mhm.
sounds that are being asked of them,
Yeah.
and that tends to be where things can come unstuck quite quickly
Hmm.
if the work hasn't been put in place prior to rehearsals and prior to the person starting uh, the performances.
Hmm. And so if they are in that situation, is there a point in the run, would you say this is probably not, none of this is generalizable. It's just interesting. I'm just interested to know, would there be a point where fatigue sets in, where, and you can kind of generally tell that they weren't quite ready, they probably didn't have the underpinnings there, or, has that come up within your own practice?
It's variable. I
Hmm.
think sticky moments for any performer tend to be. I mean, the beginning of rehearsals can be quite tricky, and I know Amanda was mentioning that. Many performers are doubling up, where they might be at crossover of contracts. So they might be rehearsing during the day in one vocal setup, and then in the evening they're going off and doing the end of the show that they're finishing in a completely different vocal setup, and that's placing huge demands on the instrument because they're having to completely change their setups. Actors that may have been resting or have been out of work for a while, suddenly being faced with like a dramatic increase of vocal load. So the beginning can be quite tricky. Um, Towards the end, when we're getting to tech and previews, that's also another sticky moment.
Hmm.
I also find that towards the end of the contract, as people start to get fatigued, or when things have accumulated, so then maybe the costumes that they've worn for a while haven't been an issue until they become an issue later on in the run towards the end of the
Hmm.
run. Something that maybe they haven't quite identified is a particular problem has over time built up into something that then transpires into vocal issues and difficulties.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because there's not really a point at which you can identify and say, actually, it's this, and I need to
No.
brain, sort that out. So then I suppose the question there is, if they've identified it by the end of the run and they're left with vocal fatigue, or they're left with a setup that's not ideal, um, do you see a lot of people coming in post show for rehabilitative, or, that sort of underpinning work to make sure it doesn't happen again, or to address issues that are sitting with them
Yes,
a
I
while?
think there tends to be for a lot of people after a big contract where because fatigue. I mean, if we talk about fatigue's an interesting one because fatigue necessarily in itself is not problematic if the person has
Mhm.
strategies to deal with fatigue. And if they have enough time to recover from the fatigue, the accumulation of fatigue that turns into habitual patterns of use that they might not have necessarily been using before, or
Mhm.
habitual fatigue that's amounted into an injury or an accident. I guess that's where fatigue becomes problematic. But
Yeah.
certainly, I see a lot of clients looking to rebalance their voices and their instruments post contracts. Sometimes what's being done is so extreme that we put in place strategies for them to get through that contract uh, sustainably and healthfully, knowing that at the end of the contract we might have to rebalance certain things, we might have to relook at certain things that they could do or that they do or that they would have done before, but that have just slightly gone a little bit awry because of the demands of the show.
Yeah. And rebalance is the word. That's perfect. That's the word I was looking for. You
Yeah.
know that. Do you see that? So I suppose my question then is, the more experienced the performer, the does it follow that they are able to sort of preempt that a little bit, or be able to come to you and go, do you know what, this is well out of where I was comfy. I know what I need to do, but actually, do they develop that? Are you seeing that? I mean, I
Yes,
would imagine
I
they
think
do,
that
but
that definitely comes with experience and
fine,
age.
yeah, yeah.
That sometimes happens when someone's been singing in a certain specific setup for a long period of their career, and then
Mm.
all of a sudden they're then asked to do something completely different, and because they've not had to address changes in vocal setup or the way they use their instrument up until then, um, they may not have been aware that that's something that could have been helpful to have put in place.
Mhm.
I think
So,
there's also a bigger question here in terms of singing lessons are expensive, and I think there's a slightly different culture between performers on Broadway and potentially performers here in the West End in terms of upkeep and maintaining training. And I think a lot of
mm,
those differences in culture are probably down to financial reasons.
mm,
Broadway performers are earning considerably more money than West End performers, so the expendable income to keep on top of their instrument and keep maintaining their voices uh, is more available to most of the Broadway
mm,
performers that I have worked with.
yeah,
Wages are considerably lower for your average West End performer. Um,
yes. Yeah, it's
so it's
again, yeah, that's not really a, I don't know what I've been thinking about, but I didn't think of it in those terms, but I am aware, yes, in terms of the Broadway performers, you generally have upkeep lessons that are fairly regular and they would be maintaining as they go through. Yeah. Is that so? I suppose for the West End performer, if they can't afford that general upkeep and they do come to then rebalance at the end, or they come for an emergency, or something's not working, or it's not happening, then where is the moment of learning, if you like, in terms of vocal health and sustainability within training to
mhm.
make sure that that is kind of mitigated, if you like?
Yeah,
That's
completely.
what I'm really interested in.
I
Like,
think it's an ongoing process of figuring that out.
yeah.
It's an ongoing process. I mean, at Arts Ed where I work, we have regular vocal health sessions that are so at the beginning of each year, each of the year groups will have a talk tailored to what vocal health might might mean for them in that particular
Mhm.
year. So what the first years are considering is very different to what the third years who are going into productions are considering. And then I
Yeah.
see the third years for another talk at the very end, just as they're about to go into the industry.
Yeah.
And other colleges are certainly doing very similar things. I mean, I'm really
Mhm.
grateful to be asked to go back to Guildford often,
Mhm.
and I go and speak to their third years as well about similar things. And I know that throughout their training, they have a very, very clear understanding of how to maintain their voices. There's a lot to be said of about what lands whilst training and what lands when people are working. I
Yeah.
think Amanda made a fantastic point in the previous talk that in training it's really difficult for us to instill the understanding and the knowledge of what doing 8 or 9 shows a week for 6, 12, 24 months might look like and
Yeah.
what that person might need over that period of time. Um,
Yeah.
so I think it's really important that performers in vocational colleges understand that the journey and the development of understanding how to look after their voice is continuous and will need to be refreshed and redefined and re-looked at throughout various stages of their career. I also see, I mean, I often see performers in their early to mid 30s that the setups and the things that they've been doing
Mhm.
and how they've been using their voice from leaving college to that point has worked, and then the cogs start behaving and functioning in slightly different ways. So there seems to be, and this is just my experience, there seems to be an influx of performers of that age. That also the casting brackets start to change, the way people
The rules,
expect to be
yeah.
sat, the
Yeah.
things
Change.
they're
Yeah.
going for,
Hmm.
start to shift, and people
Hmm.
an element of rebalancing tends to happen then as
Hmm.
well.
Yeah, and I suppose if they're trying to or aiming to move into roles, the slightly older roles, as early as possible, so that they can actually establish themselves within that moment as well, because they've possibly aged out. another musical theatre joy. That that's gone. Can't do that anymore. Off we go to the next one. Yeah, and I suppose that's gonna shift the vocal expectation
The
without the prep, like you
I,
say.
I think without steering us off course, but this might be relevant. I think there's also something to be thought about when the expectations of what we expect a 21-year-old, 22, 23-year-old grad to sound like.
Hmm.
And sometimes those expectations and what the industry expects and what we as teachers can know to be efficient, and sometimes those two don't always align.
Yeah,
And when someone who can make a certain sound, um, and quite skillfully make a certain sound that might the underpinnings might be fairly inefficient if we really dig into it, is having to produce that sound over and over again, in a professional setting. That's also when we see a lot of performers um, start to experience voice issues and pathologies and
yeah,
injuries.
yeah. And well, that also makes me sort of think back just in the training side of things. Um, I was working with a student who was going up for um he's still going up for it, so I probably won't tell you what it was, but it's a great role. And yeah, trying to get, playing about with top B flats and very nice, really good, really nice voice, but trying to sound like what he thought they wanted him to sound like at that point, which was shifting his whole resonating setup, which is making things really, to the point where he's like, oh, wait a minute, I don't know how to get this note anymore. What is it? So we had to go back, this is what's your voice? What does it sound like when you sing in your own voice when it's easy? But that made me think, well, at what point does he develop the autonomy to say, this is actually what my voice sounds like? Because I've spent so long trying to fit the box that I think my casting is,
Yeah,
and that my agent says that I should be fitting, if you get what I mean. So
completely.
I just wonder during the training process do you, I mean, I try to help with that as a one-to-one singing teacher in that point at like undergrad level. But in your own sort of experience in through training, when do you see that autonomy like developing, or is it really just when they get out there and do it? Because I feel I feel like that's
I think it
possibly.
often it often tends to be when people get out there and do it.
Mm.
And sometimes it doesn't happen until crisis point. I mean,
Mm.
an anecdote, a clinical anecdote. A while ago, we had a singer who had been having issues for a long time, um, and had forgotten what they sound like. Their physical type and stature suggested that they should be able to make a certain sound, and that's what they've been getting hired for. But actually, when we had a look with a scope and looked at their larynx, they had a massive pharynx but tiny larynx with tiny vocal folds. So actually, physiologically, they were really not set up for what
Wow.
the expectation was for
Mm.
that person to sound like. And the external expectation from well-meaning teachers, from industry professionals, from musical directors, from so many different angles, had been based on what this person presented when they came into the room, rather than and maybe that's the expectation that we would have had in clinic as well, had we not seen the size of their larynx and the
Hmm.
size of their vocal folds. So it's a really complex um, thing to unpick, because
Yes.
we're then also talking about identity, and we're talking about what people see themselves as and what
Hmm.
people aspire to be. And I think a lot of that work has to obviously come from the individual, uh, guided by experienced people around them that that allow the individual to figure it out for
I
themselves,
think
if
it's
that
that,
makes
yeah, it's the
sense.
allowing, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's allowing, but it feels like sometimes there isn't that room to be allowed to do that because you've just got to go and get a job.
yeah,
Just you should be hired already. What are you up to? You graduated yesterday. Why are you not a principal? What's going on here, kind of thing.
yeah.
Um, Yeah, which it's such a battle, I think, all the time to try and bring that through. And I'm just looking at it from the training sort of point of view as well, to just selfishly to
Mm.
try and help them find that, because I just feel like it's a fundamental aspect
I,
that we just don't get time to do it. Um,
for me, the parameters are: is the voice, can the person repeatedly do what they're doing
mhm.
comfortably with ease? Um, are they Yeah, I think the parameters are those.
Yeah.
And I think,
And
is
those,
the
I mean,
voice
that's,
responding to how we generally see voices responding at
yeah.
certain pitch ranges? Are the
Mhm.
registration events happening where we would expect the registration events happening? That kind of information really gives us information as to whether the sound is appropriate for that individual, or whether we are manufacturing or layering on things.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh,
because
yeah. And then I think that that links into what Amanda was saying as well, wasn't it? About finding that where do you sit, and then working out how long you've been perhaps in a setup that's too far from your neutral or your
completely.
happy home spot kind of thing. And I think that's the potential issue within the training, which is if it's a vocational training, and this is I'm coming from my point of view because I work at a very specific place, which is not the same as everywhere else, just so that everybody knows. So I'm at Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, and it's its own little everything. It's like, yeah, it's definitely not a it's not dancing, it's not, cruise, it's not anything. It's just its own thing. And that's kind of interesting, but it does have the same setup as many courses where you're doing a performance class every week. Maybe you're bringing a different genre, maybe you're bringing a different type of song, a different something. So what we see is next week we're doing legit.
Hmm.
2 weeks later we're doing belt. 2 weeks later we've got, and I'm just kind of, as a teacher, you're sitting thinking, 2 weeks, in 2 weeks, we are
Yeah.
not going from legit to belt safely in a way that allows you to work out what that is. So you're kind of piling technique on top of technique, and it's not sitting, it's not embedding, And that's always my worry, really, is to say, when do we get a minute to just find you
Yeah, finding that
and
person's
your
what
voice? Yeah.
a teacher of mine once called it home base, home neutral.
Home base.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So what does that person's voice just do if
Mm.
we don't layer on the stylistic stuff? If we just
Yeah.
allow it
And
to
and
be
and a
working.
great point to mitigate any issues that are coming up, to be able to return to that and to be able to identify, okay, well, that's not comfortable. I'm not happy there.
And also
Something that's not right.
knowing where you're starting, so and where you need to get to, and what those adjustments need to be to get from A to B. What does my vocal track need to
Yes.
do to get from me singing the way I sing to me making a sound that resembles Frankie Valli?
Mhm.
So what are those shifts that I have to do?
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I suppose, we're faced with so much opportunity to watch people and to imitate people and to go, oh, that's what I need to sound like today, and please don't. That sort of thing. So, which
And
is
that
hard, isn't it?
it's hard, but also in some respects it can also be a blessing because people are hearing a lot and listening to a lot more. Like with
Yeah.
YouTube, and people can see live acoustic performances. People can hear what the voice sounds like in an acoustic setting,
Mhm.
where it's not in a, like it's different. So I think that's not necessarily always a problematic thing. Sometimes singers are coming to the studio making certain sounds that are actually super efficient and super
Yeah.
because of what they've been listening to.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because I suppose way back in the day it was the original cast recording and that's all you got really.
Yeah,
So we have 100 Idina Menzel's doing exactly the same thing and
completely.
nothing different, and it's all exactly the same. And then, yeah, like you say, we do get these, and then I think the live stuff is fantastic. And I do think I've had lots of students who've gone, and I've watched him in this, and I've seen him in that, and he does this, and in that one he didn't. I don't know what happened there. And then this one he did this, which is actually lovely because, like you say, you see them in real life.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But I do think it also does still keep this expectation that my voice could just do that though, because I really like the way he's doing that or she's doing that. So I'll just try that and let's go there. And then that takes you out of that sort of home setting extreme in an extreme way, I guess. But still, it's also experimentation, which is great. Oh, so difficult. It's so difficult. Probably not going to solve it today, but there you are. So if I'll pull us back to, I suppose, some of our questions, but this is absolutely fascinating. Just if anybody's got questions, please put them in, but we'll just chat otherwise. It's fine. Um, so just sort of talking about how the industry has changed, because obviously I now feel really old because I was thinking that when when I first started out many years ago, it was around the time of a lot of, Jekyll and Hyde and that sort of time. I mean, we had Michael Ball, he was doing his Gethsemane, he was giving it every beans, he was giving it everything. And I was like, okay. And that was sort of it. That's what we had. We had that Frank Wildhorn sound, and it was all a bit beige and kind of that. But as things have ramped up and changed and it's so shifted, I'm not going to go through the history of it, but I do remember a massive shift around Rent, like
Hmm.
coming in, and there just being this huge vocal shift to something else that I didn't understand. And I wanted to do it, but I didn't know what it was. Um, Along with that, in terms of vocal health awareness, you will not probably go all the way back to there because I'm sure you're not in the same age as me. But in terms of vocal health awareness, has it shifted with that, do you think, or has it caught up with it, or is there still a ways to go? What has been the change
I think
that
there's
you
still
see?
a ways to go, but certainly with social media, and
Yeah.
people being able to see what people at the top of their game are doing and how they're looking after their voices. Um, there being a lot of information for people to find out. Um, the shifts have been massive.
Mhm.
So and for the majority, massive and positive. Yes, we still have odd things being sent around and distributed, but I think there will always be that, and there will always be miracle cures and things that don't really work, but and that are being talked about as if they do work. But I think certainly performers of now are probably a lot more savvy and have access to vocal health information and advice much more readily than
Yeah.
certainly when I was at drama school.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and it's more accepted, isn't it, that that's absolutely fine, and that you should be doing this warm up, and that you should be steaming, or you should be bubbling, or you should be doing whatever else it is
Yeah.
as part of the course. It's not just a quick sort of nip in and warm up, which is the power of, I guess, social media in that sense, to normalize it and to say, yeah, it's absolutely fine. Are we? Do you see? Well, I think we did talk about this in the previous conversation, but the idea of performers talking about their vocal health struggles and issues.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
completely resonated with Amanda talking about. I think it definitely depends on what stage that performer is at in their career.
Yeah.
I think the more high profile that performer is, the more speaking out when you're a high profile performer is less likely to do your career
Yeah.
damage than being a regular working performing artist who talks about their vocal struggles. Now, I
Mhm.
I I would love to say that it's a safe environment for anyone to be able to talk about their issues, but sadly, I still feel that there is stigma
Mhm.
around people having voice issues unless they are a name. That said, when high profile musical theatre performers and pop artists do talk about their vocal struggles, it's it's just so wonderful to see the clients that are struggling with their issues be able to just soften and realize that they're not alone in it, and that there is it's such a common thing for people to experience. I think we're still not at the stage where we see vocal injuries as as acceptable and as okay and as a thing that happens as dance injuries, for example, or athletic
Mm,
injuries that happen
mm.
on the athletics track.
Yes.
You can tell how athletic I am. So,
The athletics arena on the course. Yeah, I don't know. Wherever you do your
I mean,
athletics.
yeah, we're still not there. We're
Yeah,
getting there slowly,
yeah.
but we're not quite there.
Yeah, well, I
Um,
mean, I think that was evident if talking about the preparation in terms of West End understudies and, you know, that are not there, that are just not there, that are not in place for actors, you know,
yeah,
in big roles, in heavy roles though, which you would in any other job. I just, if you looked at the load on like the muscular load, if you looked at it and put that onto any other person, you would not be asking them to do that and not risk an injury
I think
and it be okay, you know.
what we're doing more and more of. I mean, there have. I don't want to say there have always been vocal coaches on shows because I couldn't say that for certain, but there have been vocal coaches on shows for a long time.
Mhm.
Um, we are having more and more shows that understand the value of having a vocal coach on the show. Um, we're also starting to slowly uh, see the value of having alternates in massive roles like Alphaba, and it not being such a issue for there to be an alternate in such an athletic singing
Yeah,
role. And I hope that as we keep moving forward and the understanding of what the human voice can do and what we're capable of and as we start to understand vocal health more and more, that becomes more of a common occurrence of having alternates in roles that are massive sings.
heavy. Yeah.
Um,
I mean, it's such a difference for everybody here who's from the US. It's a massive difference that I it sort of beggars belief that it is that different,
yeah,
you know, in terms of the West End and well, not really, because I know Broadway is much. There's more money there. There's more everything. It's just more. But it's the same job
mhm.
fundamentally that you're asking across the pond and here. So,
and
you know.
and I think on the basis of vocal coaching, I think the when that happens is quite crucial in terms of determining how someone might fare in a contract.
Mm, yeah,
I think the more prepared people are prior to starting rehearsals, the better set up they are for the rest of the run.
mm,
I've been called in to prepare performers for shows, and then I've also been called in to crisis manage when actually then it just becomes very, very tricky because you're having to pick up pieces and get
mm,
someone through something that maybe you can never say a vocal injury would have definitely been avoided because there are so many elements to that. But
yeah,
but certain accidents can be mitigated and safeguarding can be put in place to avoid certain things from happening
yeah,
if preparation happens early on enough. And I think that's
yeah,
maybe not quite still recognised that prior to we're getting good at having vocal coaches on the shows, but it's not quite as common protocol to have 6 months of preparing someone for a show, and that's to do
yeah,
with when casting happens and when casting
yeah,
announcements happen, and so that's also
mm,
I understand that that
yeah,
can't just happen. There
yeah.
are a lot of things that fall into place for that to not be able to happen.
Hmm. And I suppose, I mean, it does bring up the idea that there's also that kind of individual uh kind of empowerment to know that yes, I will prepare for 6 months for this role. I'm up for it. I'm doing, you know, this is what I'm going to put in place rather than I'm going to try and get my voice to the point where I can just get this role and then hope for
Yeah,
the best and we'll get, you know, we'll sort it out later. But with that, because it sounds like obviously there are a few things, there's quite a lot of things that we could improve as we go along, but it's all good. It's not terrible. It's not the end of the world. But
I think
are
we're
there any
heading in the
other?
right direction.
Yeah,
Definitely heading in
exactly.
the
It
right
sounds like
direction. But
yeah, it's moving. So are there any other big changes that you would, if you could just wave your little Glinda wand and sort, you know, what regarding specifically vocal health and performance sustainability, what would you love to see going in?
Um,
across the board, I suppose?
I think across the board, having a better understanding of how important how artists can hear themselves on stage is. Because we still have a lot of theatres that have old sound systems and performers just cannot hear themselves,
Yeah.
and that inevitably leads to injuries and voice issues. Um, so I think that's a big one. I
Yeah.
think a better understanding of how to navigate and mitigate illness and voice rest, and how long performers are able to take off without feeling guilty about it. Um, knowing when is the right time for you to come off, knowing when
Mhm.
you're not 100% but are able to do the job.
Mhm.
I think educating performers so that they have, I talk with my clients often about having an A show, a B show, and a C show, and having those things in place before you start the run. So
Mhm.
knowing that when 6 months down the line you're feeling a bit fragile, knowing what adjustments you might make to the way you sing that music or speak that music. Um, I think that would be
Mhm.
so more performers having an understanding of that. Um,
Yeah.
More clinical teams involved with productions, I think, would be a really good shout.
Mhm.
So many of the productions in town have physiotherapists, which is fantastic. But having and there are steps forward in some of the big major production companies that are developing pathways for performers that have like clinical pathways for performers having difficulties, but that becoming more of an industry standard where there is a team attached to the show with a vocal
Mm.
coach that's on the show. So the
Yeah, and I think
vocal
in
coach doesn't
touring,
feel alone. So there is a speech therapist at hand. There is a
yeah,
laryngologist at hand that performers can get seen by, and
that's
there's
the dream.
open channel. Well, I
That's
mean,
that's amazing.
yeah, and it's starting to
Yeah,
happen, Claire. Like
amazing. That'd
I
be
mean,
so good, wouldn't it?
yeah.
I love the
But
idea. I
more of
mean,
that would be really,
just
really
to
great.
expect it, just to actually expect it, and to know that. I mean, are you if you went with a traveling athletics team in any sport, you're not going to go without a physio. You're not going to
Exactly.
go without a doctor. You're not going to go with, and then like I think that's everything sort of just keeps coming back to the expectations that we have to of these performers to just carry on. It's all good, and I know there are differences. I get there's international differences, but this is it's a lot to expect
Yeah, yeah.
from these individuals.
I
Yeah.
think having industry guidelines as well about rehearsals, for example.
Hmm.
Having standards that or guidelines that rehearsals run to. Singers singing unmiked with amplified instruments in rehearsals is a really common thing.
Yeah. Oh.
And singers being expected to sing full out repeatedly
Mhm.
in rehearsals is still a thing. Of course, we get fantastic MDs and fantastic directors and fantastic creative teams that understand that's not possible, that singers
Yeah.
can't do that, and that put things in place. But it should be a case that in any professional context in the West End, that is those are considerations that are being made. So performers
Yeah.
don't feel like so many of the artists that I've worked with feel like they should be able to make more sound than an amplified band because that's just what happens in the rehearsal room. Um,
Yeah.
and actually understanding that's not the way
No.
things work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
And I think even in opera regulations, let's say, so there are strict amounts of time before you have to have a break, within most opera houses when
mhm.
if rehearsing.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
So why that's couldn't be the case within a musical theatre rehearsal is really interesting. Why that's not come across, I'm not sure. But it's pretty militant in opera. I know they could be like, no, sorry, off now, off I go. I've got to go and
Fascinating.
have a sec. Yeah, it's really
I'm not a classical singer, so my world of my understanding of that world is very very limited. So
yeah.
that's really interesting to hear.
I was just chatting to somebody who's a Belgian opera singer, and he was in an opera house, and he was just like, nope, it's literally stop, the end. Nope, no more. That's it. it's the time. And I was like, that, I mean, the care, whether it's more just in place and that's just something we do, but it's founded on at least giving some vocal rest
Yeah.
so that you can reduce that load and, over the period of the rehearsal. Which
So I guess
would be
if I
great.
were to wave a magic wand, guidelines like that would be in place. I know that
Would be in place. Yeah.
Those kind of guidelines are in the works with BAPAM. I know there's a team
That
that
would
are
be
kind
great.
of looking at producing literature that is available to performers. So
Oh, yes.
yeah,
I mean,
so
that's it. It's just
it's
getting it out there
exciting.
and getting people to sort of engage with it as well and just accepting that that would be
Hmm.
really good. I mean, all of the things we've chatted about today are sort of dream, yes, let's get it going. But I know, like you're saying, they're in the works and they're coming. And if we could take a leaf out of some of the Broadway books and get the support that's in there, I think for the UK, it's only a good thing. Because we just want to look after these guys. They do a lot.
Yeah.
So,
And
it's like,
also the show is better as a result of
yes,
people don't yeah
yeah.
people
Whether
don't
you come
have
to see
to
what
come
that
off as
person they're going to
often if
become.
yeah so I think it's yeah
Yeah,
obviously doing it for the best of the performers and the industry.
yeah. Well, we've talked about it today, so it's clearly going to happen in the next couple of weeks.
I'll keep
Just
waving that
cross
magic
my
wand.
fingers. Yeah, I'll just wait for that. Hello, is that the West End? I was just checking because we did talk about this last week.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so I suppose, well, we should wrap it up. I know because I'm taking up your time, but it's so interesting. It's so good.
No.
If anybody's got questions, pop them in. But otherwise, I think I should probably, yeah, let's just do a little closing question for Besfort, which is, if you could give one piece of advice to an aspiring musical theatre performer about protecting their voice, what would it be so that they could have a long and sustainable career?
My and this comes as no surprise being a singing teacher, but my advice would be keep checking in, keep working with the teacher throughout your career. Um, and even when you feel like there's nothing going on or going wrong, checking in to keep your voice moving,
Mm,
keep a sense of where your home base is and where you've moved from, if you've moved from it. Um, I think that would be my greatest advice.
great. And
Greatest
allowing
advice,
you to just
my
update.
not my greatest advice, my the thing I would urge
Yeah.
performers to do.
No, it is great advice. That's okay. That's good. But also, yeah, that allows you to sort of keep that technique developing for the voice that you have now as
Yeah,
well, rather than the one that you thought you had 20 years ago when you sort of, it's all fresh and lovely. Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. I'll stop us there because we've rabbited on for about 50 minutes, but hopefully that was interesting for everybody who's been listening today. Anything you want to ask or any information you want, I think we'll be able to. Oh, here we go. We've got a little thing. Let me see something. Stay. Oh, okay. Yeah. Sunita, yeah, you can get in touch with Peter in Voice Study Centre. They'll be able to give you a little thing to say that you've attended this, which is nice. Thanks, Maura. Just saying thank you for this invaluable conversation. Well, it has been invaluable. I just love chatting to you, Besford, about all these
it's
things.
been
It's
great. Thank you
really
for having me, Claire.
interesting. Yeah, absolutely no problem. Great. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to oh, in fact, yes, there we go. That was a good point, Megan, before I switch myself off. There is a series, so we have three of these, and there's going to be about three or four in each of our threads. So we've got different threads of research. So they include things like dance and embodiment, lots of different areas of musical theatre. So just keep an eye out for them because I will be inviting lots of different people on to chat about those. The next one coming up is Tracy's. So that's Tracy Bourne, Dr. Tracy Bourne. You will know her from things such as Amazing Bits of Research and books. She's an Australian musical theatre professor and also researcher. So that's going to be a really interesting one. And we get the US kind of perspective there. And the last thing there we go. Just to remind you, so Tracy Bourne is on the 24th of July. That's 10:30 a.m. in the UK because US time, we have to make sure we accommodate her because she's being very kind. But we have got as well, if you're interested in like around about the MA, because obviously Voice Study Centre does this brilliant voice pedagogy MA, which I do module one of if you're interested. There's a free upcoming MA information session. It's a wee question answer with Debbie somebody who takes you through the course and stuff. So if you are interested, or you know anybody who might want to ask questions, it's on the 15th of July, 5 till 6. Well, that's my tiny bit of advertising. But yes, to answer your question, this is a series and we'll be back with more. So thank you so much for coming, everybody. And I'm going
Thank
to
you.
hop our recording off and say thanks very much, Besford.
Goodbye.
Bye.